Looking at the Buccaneers matched up against each of their division opponents, that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at EKloskyWTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am the deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Of course, Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com, and you can catch the show Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, share our appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider, one-on-one text conversations with me. No ads, no hashtags, nothing stupid like that. Just genuine text conversations. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are just 2 weeks away from training camp getting underway. So as we begin to ramp up to the start of another Buccaneer season, I thought it would be fun for Evan and I to spend the next 30 minutes discussing Steven Stamkos and the mistakes that were made by Julian Breezeball. No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
I'm interested to hear what Evan has to say regarding the state of the NFC South prior to all of these training camps starting. So we're going to go one by one, taking a look at how the Bucs match up against each team in the division, where the Bucs are stronger, where the other team may have an advantage, and how it all shakes out. And then at the very end, we are going to make Evan predict how the NFC South will finish, and we will hold him to those predictions and mercilessly ridicule him if he is wrong. But let's start with the last place team from last season, the Carolina Panthers, where a former friend is now a foe in head coach Dave Canales. And Evan, since there's probably like a lot to choose from here, let's start with where you think the Bucs have an advantage over the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, as far as they have more advantages over the Panthers than disadvantages. I would say significantly more. Really, what I'll say for most of the time is with the Buccaneers, obviously their pass rush is going to lose out against many other teams as far as pressures created. Carolina, maybe not so much in that category. Certainly when we get to the Saints, they will have that edge. But look, let me just talk about some of the players that I do like for the Panthers, because I don't think this is obviously a playoff contender. I also don't think it's going to be a 2-win team either. They're going to be better under Dave Canales. How much better? I don't know, but even if Dave Canales makes them a 5-game winner, improving by 3 is pretty significant. So I think that's something that I just want to get out of the gates as we kind of analyze some of these players. They did upgrade at coach and coaching staff. Bryce Young, I think, will be better under Dave Canales. It's going to be an easier system for him to learn. I think, obviously, I'm taking Baker Mayfield. Running back, I'm probably taking Rachaad White. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is good, but Rachaad White's a bit more versatile. Wide receiver, I'm taking the Buccaneers, right? But I do think that Deontay Johnson is a very good addition to this squad. Deontay Johnson, his kind of analytical stuff has been a lot better than his performance. Pittsburgh, not the great offense, not the greatest of offensive systems to be in. And now if we saw what Dave Canales did for a guy like Mike Evans, I have a feeling Deontay Johnson is going to be that role now, and that Adam Thielen will move into the Chris Godwin role, which wasn't a fun one for Godwin to play. I think he really didn't utilize him correctly. So I'm a little bit more bullish on Deontay than Thielen. Regardless, I'm giving the head nod to the Buccaneers. Tight end, Buccaneers again. I'm not going to out here say that Cade Otton's all world, but I will certainly take Cade Otton over Tommy Tremble or Jatavian Sanders. I don't know what he's going to be like, the rookie coming out of Texas. Offensive line, I really do have to commend Canales and company, Dan Morgan over there. They have made it a huge initiative or a huge focus is that they're going to rebuild that sucker because Bryce got crushed, absolutely obliterated in year one in the NFL. They've spent a lot of money on that offensive line. I still will take the Buccaneers offensive line as a whole over the Panthers. But if you're looking for one area where the Panthers will be significantly better than where they were last year, it's going to be the offensive line because that's where a lot of the money just went. Otherwise, defensively, losing Burns, losing Luvu, I think are significant L's that cannot be understated. Certainly for the Buccaneers to not have to worry about Brian Burns or have him, punch Cody Mauch in the face and get tossed out of a game early is helpful. The one they did add Jadeveon Clowney, who I think is really a better. I think of him more as a kind of a Shaq Barrett type. I like him in a run defense more than really getting after QBs at this point in his career. But Derek Brown's my favorite player on this team. Just a bulldog in the middle of this defensive line. Go pop on the tape week 18, the final week where Antoine Winfield Jr. made that remarkable play and they somehow escaped Carolina to make the playoffs. Go pop on that game. Just watch Derek Brown completely obliterate the Buccaneers. Just took them to town. He is really good, probably underrated. I don't think he made it to the Pro Bowl last year. Was surprised by that. But I would say J.C. Horn is another guy who's awesome, just has to stay healthy. So that's kind of my breakdown of the Panthers. Nothing too great. Nothing that I'm kind of maybe you can make an argument that Derek Brown elevates their line a little bit more than the Buccaneers, but for the most part across the board, I'm taking the Bucs and what they got over the Panthers, despite the fact that I think that the Panthers are going to be a slightly better team this season.
I'll give them one more win, just one. They'll
3-14.
3-14.
Yeah.
Real quick, is there one matchup where you look at the Panthers and the Buccaneers and you think, you know what? This could spell trouble for the Buccaneers when these two teams meet and may end up creating an upset for the Panthers when you just take a look at a position group against a position group?
Derek Brown. If you're talking about, think about the one weakness that the Buccaneers have. There are two significant weaknesses the Buccaneers have. All right. One's on the defensive side. We won't talk about it right now. One is the interior offensive line. Derek Brown will completely maul that offensive line. Now, they don't play the Panthers until later in the season. So you're hoping by that time that Graham Barton isn't such a rookie anymore. I believe very strongly in Graham Barton. I think he's going to be a multi-time Pro Bowl center.
Oh, yeah.
Year one, though, I'm not putting crazy expectations on him. So I don't want to say that he's going to come in and dominate immediately, right? So if you're talking about a bit of an issue that I can see coming down the chute, it's Derek Brown just completely screwing up the interior offensive line and being a nightmare for Baker Mayfield in the backfield, and also a nightmare for Rachaad White trying to establish a rushing game up the middle.
All right. Well, the team that everyone loves to hate is coming up next on Locked On Bucs, part of The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You want to catch an upcoming Rays game? Tickets when they host the Yankees start at $50. Then they host the Guardians, where tickets start at $23. And their homestand against the Cincinnati Reds, you can get tickets starting at $37. And right now, you can get Buccaneers regular season tickets as low as $50, or see the return of Steven Stamkos when the Predators come to Amalie Arena, starting at $134. And all these prices feature Game Time's all-in pricing, so there won't be any surprises when you get to checkout. You can wait until the last minute when prices drop by as much as 60%, or you can buy them now knowing you have Game Time's lowest price guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. Rashad White had some interesting things to say. We're going to break that down on Thursday's show. In the meantime, if you want to hear the latest news from around all sports, NBA and NHL free agency is underway. NFL news, because the NFL never, ever stops doing things. And, of course, you have MLB, you have the WNBA, you have the Olympics getting ready to be started. But you want to hear more than just national narratives and the biggest stories without fake arguments and manufactured screaming. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without the screaming. Locked On Sports Today is streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. The team that's always a thorn in the Buccaneers side, a fan base that's just simply always a joy to deal with. But last year they split with the Bucs.
Should really get Ross Jackson on this podcast to kind of talk some real trash.
We're not going to talk about Ross Jackson, and we're going to hope that he forgot the bet that I lost for the network divisional preview. But they did split with the Bucs late last season. Getting that win to keep their playoff hopes alive before those being dashed and destroyed, much to the joy of Buccaneers fans. But taking a look at this season, where do the Bucs hold an advantage over the New Orleans Saints?
I think most offensive positions, I would argue that the Buccaneers are going to have an advantage. Outside of Kamara, who I think, I don't want to be disrespectful for what he's done in the NFL. I think there's a valid argument to say that maybe he's getting too old and is kind of hitting that tipping point. But until Rashad White can do a little bit more, I have to let Kamara kind of win that battle. And obviously I love Chris Olave, go Bucs. But that offensive line is not pretty. They struggled last year, even though I like some of the names on there, and they did some tinkering. And they're trying to fix it. That was a huge concern. So I don't know what they're kind of looking at from an O-line perspective entering this season. But when you get to defense, the number one thing, now we get to the other issue that the Bucs have, right? The other issue the Bucs have is they can't really address the pressures. I think the number one thing that the Saints will – I have a lot of questions about the Saints offensively entering this year. Defensively, I think they're probably underrated. I think that they're still going to be an exceptional defensive team. And we kind of saw that in Tampa last year when Baker Mayfield, first off, took a cheap shot, which
Shocker.
I'm not. There has to be some sort of rebuttal. You can't let that slide. So I'm wondering if they're going to remember that. I'm sure Baker will. I'm sure the media is going to bring it up as well. But I mean, they even somehow squeezed in Chase Young because, the salary cap, they just continually push themselves into more and more kind of hell every year. But I mean, Cam Jordan, Chase Young, Brian Breesy, Nathan Shepard. I like this group. On top of guys like Granderson, Pete Warner, I think is a dude. Demario Davis, man, just like the way that we talk about Levante David for the Bucs is the way that Saints fans talk about Demario Davis. I love watching his tape. I think their cornerback secondary situation is very good as well. I don't really want to get into I think that linebackers, because I trust the couple that they do have, I have to give them the edge there. That if Demario and Levante equal out, then I think that the other pieces will lean Saints. I think from a safety perspective, obviously the Buccaneers are going to have that. From a cornerback perspective, maybe the Saints have that. So they're really kind of from a defensive standpoint, and I think the Saints probably lean a little bit better than the Bucs, maybe on paper. But that matchup, or the two matchups coming down to them, it's really going to come down to, can the Bucs offense score on the Saints defense? Can the Saints offense score on the Bucs defense? And I think we're looking at a couple of real gauntlet type of games. And the classic Todd Bowles line is whoever forces turnovers in that game usually wins the game. So I think those are going to be pretty even Steven battles, just because of where I don't think either team can overwhelm the other. So I think it's going to just be a straight up gauntlet.
Yeah, in the words of good old JR, we'll have a couple of slobber knockers there between the Bucs and the Saints.
And I will say that the biggest concern for the Saints, depth. Because we all talk about the salary cap stuff and how they navigate it, yada, yada, yada. But their depth year over year continually gets worse because of that. So their top line talent, I especially defensively, I like it. But their depth is not good enough, and it shows. So if they have some injuries, they're going to really be in trouble.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to knock the Saints because that's what I do. But there's no doubt that they are a talented football team. Again, when you're looking at the starters, they have plenty of talent. I don't think they have quite as much top tier talent as the Buccaneers do, but I think that some of their kind of average mid-range talent is better than that of the Bucs upon kind of the same playing field there. So it's first and foremost, and you can call me a hater all you want, I don't care. Chase Young's not good. Chase Young does not worry me in the least. And if you
and remember on this, he's playing a rotational role, right? He doesn't have to be the guy,
right? And I will say that I can claim that that's not anti-Buckeye slander because David Harrison, Locked On Commanders, he agrees with me.
I'm sure there's a lot of Commander fans who jump on that wagon too.
To David's credit, he's been preaching it since basically 2021. But yeah, you take a look. Olave, he's fantastic. Kamara, he still has his spurts. He still has his moments. I don't think he's the Kamara of old, kind of like you said. Diet Tebow is always going to be, an issue in one way, shape, or form.
He is. Todd Bowles has not figured out Taysom Hill.
I mean, really nobody has, but yeah, we could use a John Lynch level hit on Taysom Hill.
So Jordan's here for it now.
There it is. But yeah, I don't want to say that the Saints aren't a challenge for the Buccaneers. I think they certainly are. It's just a matter, like you said, of, by time they meet, are there injuries on either side? And then which defense is going to be able to create the most opportunities for their offense and take the most opportunities away from the opposing offense. So those are always going to be interesting games. They're going to be heated games, but we do have to talk about
I just want to mention very quickly, I will say, at least when they go to New Orleans week 6, they have 10 days to prepare for that game. And I believe the Saints play Monday Night Football that same week. So they're either going to have to punt the Monday Night Football game or really kind of like go into that Buccaneers game shorthanded because when looking at the schedule, the Buccaneers didn't have many scheduling wins, I should say, where there's an obvious advantage. But against the Saints in New Orleans, Week 6, that is the biggest one.
Definitely good to note and something to keep an eye on. And I'm sure we'll talk about it leading up to the game, the extended rest for the Bucs, the short rest for the Saints. But we do have to talk about the national media darlings and sexy pick to win the South. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs. Raheem Morris is the coach. Everyone is gushing over Kirk Cousins because I don't know why. Bijan Robinson entering his second year could be an incredibly formidable opponent. Drake London looks like he's legit. Kyle Pitts might finally get utilized correctly. Lots of talent on the defensive side of the ball in Atlanta. So, Evan, I want to kind of flip things around just a little bit and talk about where the Falcons are better than the Bucs, considering all that hype that they have been getting essentially for the last 4 months following the addition of Kirk Cousins.
I got to go Kirk over Baker.
Never.
Got to go. Now, playoff-wise is a different story, but I got to go Kirk. I mean, the production's there. He's been consistent as long as you keep him out of prime time. But for the most part, you're probably taking Kirk. I'm going to take Kyle Pitts, a tight end. I like their offensive line. Do I think it's overwhelmingly better than the Buccaneers? No, I'd probably lean towards more of a push area with strengths in different area. Defensive line I'm giving to the Falcons. Linebackers, I'll give that to I'll give it a push. Buccaneers have the best linebacker, maybe. The Falcons might have a good clump there afterwards. Safety duo I give to the Buccaneers, but it's not like the Falcons are far behind, especially with Jesse.
Jesse Bates is unreal.
Yeah, so I mean, Antoine Winfield Jr. is amazing, but Jesse Bates is amazing too. It's just you're talking like splitting hairs here. And cornerback is maybe like the biggest X factor for both teams. I don't know where I kind of stand on that one, to be honest. So, and running back, I'm going Bijan. I'm going with that whole Bijan, Algier, give me both of them. So I think that here's the thing. The biggest reason why the Falcons have this steam and momentum is the coaching situation, which we're not talking about because it's not a player-driven thing. The coaching situation is night and day. They've had the talent on this team for the past couple of years. They've had atrocious quarterback play. That theoretically has been fixed. Now, I don't know what Kirk's health situation is, if he's going to look exactly like himself immediately, but with a competent coach, certainly a competent offensive coach now, they're going to be better. And they have a really bad schedule. I should say they have a really fortunate schedule. It's bad in terms of the teams they're playing. It's good for them. So you mix in the fact that they got a way better coaching situation with Raheem, a way better offensive mind now in tow. You got a schedule that favors you completely. You got the talent on paper to at least make the playoffs. I'm not saying that they're going to push for a Super Bowl here, but they got a playoff caliber roster. it just smells like a team that is going to be in the fight. And why their win total is high, why they're being projected why many believe they're going to win the division. It all makes complete sense. I'm not saying that the Buccaneers are certainly I look at the Buccaneers roster and I'm like, wow, they're going to get thrashed, right? It's not like when I looked at the Buccaneers and the Panthers and was like, yeah, I'm giving the Buccaneers pretty much like maybe all but one position. It's not like that with the Falcons. I just think that offensively, they're going to be so much different than what Arthur Smith was doing for this team. And in doing so, usually when you get a new staff, you get a little bit of a bump. You get a little bit of there's some new thoughts and ideas and creativity. And I think the Falcons will be able to ride that for a little bit this season. So while we can go back and forth on the players, and while I think there's probably like across the board, maybe an even split on positional groups, maybe maybe you got +1 one way or the other. But the coaching staff is the X factor for the Falcons. What are they going to do to finally get this talent to where it deserves to be versus what we have seen where they've been completely blown up games they should win. They won in Tampa and they tried to give that game away. In the Buccaneers game in Atlanta, they choked that one away to the Bucs. So, they've choked a ton of games away these past couple of years. That's what I think is going to change.
Well, and you mentioned the primetime woes. 3 of their first 5 games are in primetime. Week 2 at Philadelphia, week 3 hosting the Chiefs, and then week 5 hosting the Bucs. So right out of the gate, Kirko Chains is going to get tested on primetime. And then they do have another primetime game in December. But, I'm one of those people that, I said it last year. I would have taken Baker Mayfield over a trade for Kirk Cousins back then. I've never bought into Kirk. I think the best part of him is his agent's ability to negotiate. And I understand that he's certainly done some good things in the regular season, but you're talking about he got to go from Stephon Diggs to Justin Jefferson and has these elite, and he had Dalvin Cook behind him early on in Minnesota. So he's had this elite talent and has just done nothing with it. But
he's been very productive himself. And I do want to mention that this isn't like, I don't want to take Kirk over Baker. Like I'm taking it purely on like what I've seen on the field, right? Not like, hey, this is what their contract's worth, or hey, if you were to trade for one, what would they, like that. I'm not factoring that into the equation.
Fair enough.
Because I don't know if I would have traded for Kirko or signed him for that money. It made sense for the Falcons. The Falcons needed a quarterback. Like they feel confident in what their team. Their quarterback play has been so atrocious. So that it makes sense for them. Baker makes a lot of sense for the Bucs, and it's a pretty good deal when you factor everything in.
And then, of course, they turn around and drafted another quarterback instead of using it on a position that they probably could have upgraded. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I think that's I understand the long-term outlook. If you're going to get Kirk to say that, hey, we're a win-now team, why are you worried about the future? And it's nothing against Penix. It's nothing against Penix. He could be really good for the Falcons for a long time. I don't get it. If you're going kind of all in the present, why are you playing the long game? I just would have rather you have really taken another need. You could have added something defensively, and especially like at the pass rush, which I think is a bit of a weakness for them. Especially, Grady Jarrett's coming off a significant injury. So,
and for that matter, so is Kirk Cousins. We don't really know how he's going to bounce back from that injury. So, the Kirk that we saw in Minnesota may not be the one that's playing in Atlanta. Only time will really tell. But Evan, let's go ahead and close this thing out. And I would like to hear your prediction, top to bottom. how does the NFC South finish following the 2024 season?
Falcons, Bucks, Saints, Panthers. And
no.
I mean, I have my prediction is 9-8. I have 9-8 Bucks. And the Falcons probably get to 10 wins. Again, this is like you have to factor in the schedule. The Bucks have a really hard schedule, especially to start the year. And the Falcons have a really soft schedule. So it's nothing against the talent. The Buccaneers, there's no reason for me to change it yet. But, I have a 9-8 record right now. I think that's pretty conservative. I think their ceiling's 11. I think their floor is 7. So I put right in the middle. I'm just going to take my median. But, I think I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think that the Buccaneers are going to be built for 2025 when, A, they get to get one more draft of replenishments. I think they get a little bit more money, and their schedule won't be hell. I think that's like really the world's all colliding at once.
All right. Well, and you and I were talking pre-show, the Lightning being built for 2 years from now. So 2025 into 26 could
Tampa Bay is coming back.
Tampa Bay is back. Start selling the T-shirts now. Get ahead of it.
Yep. Tampa Bay, 25-ish to 28-ish.
I'll take it. And my dad's got his fingers crossed that the Rays get it figured out too, and bring a baseball championship.
I like them in their long window too. I'm jumping on with the boys at Locked On Rays. I think for Friday's episode. So if you're a Rays fan, I got some goodies over there too.
All right. Well, yeah, make sure you go check that out. And Evan, what do you have going on over on 10 Tampa Bay and 10tampabay.com now that Stamkos watch has turned into just 2 weeks worth of tiers?
Yeah, I mean, the two things I want to mention, because it is kind of a quiet time right now. The Olympics are about to pop up in a couple of weeks. But head to 10tampabay.com. I did a commentary on the Stamkos deal, why Julien Brisebois did what he did. I shouldn't say deal, the letting Stamkos walk and getting Gensel. Why JBB might have done what he did. I also have a commentary up there from last month that's still very relevant today of what the Rays will likely do, should do at the trade deadline coming up July 30th, which is going to be selling to some degree. But I walk you through kind of how Eric Neander probably has to handle all that. So some written content versus the on-air stuff that we do for 10 Tampa Bay and 10 Tampa Bay Plus. So make sure you head to 10tampabay.com, check out those things. And again, hit me up on Twitter at eClaskEWTSP right there at the bottom. As long as you're respectful, I'll most likely respond to you.
All right. And of course, you can check me out over at BucsNation.com and on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.